Okay. I tried to do this earlier and mess something up about it, so I'm doing it a second time. So hopefully I'll be a little more efficient. This video here is to take you through how I want you to finish the spreadsheet and graphs for the acceleration lab that you collected. I think it was 2 weeks ago today, so that would have been back on the 7th. So as of right now, you have a bunch of position and time data, and so I'm going to take you through the I'm going to take you through the spreadsheet, setting it up, what I want you to calculate, refreshing your memory on some spreadsheet capabilities, and then talk to you about doing some graphs. Now, I don't know exactly everything that you're seeing here. So let's get started with the spreadsheet. So you're going to open up a untitled spreadsheet. And so the first thing that I want you to do is come up here. I got my little button here that highlights stuff. Come up to the naming, and we're going to refer to this as acceleration lab. And then you guys can put your name. It doesn't have to be in parentheses. Oh, dang it. There we go. Put your name there, and then we're going to come down into the spreadsheet. Now, we are going to use the headers. We're going to end up with 4 different columns here. We're going to use row 3 for our headers. Now, the first 2 columns are going to look exactly like they did in the toy car lab. We're going to do a position and a time column. So in A3, we are going to put our position. The one thing that is different this time is that I had you measure the positions off of that paper tape in centimeters, and we're going to go to the nearest tenths there. In B3, this is where we'll have our time, and that is still being measured in seconds. And so your data should start in cell A4 for the positions and B4 for the times. Now, I'm going to put just a few sample values in here so that I can show you some initial calculations for columns 3 and 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 0.0 because that's going to be everybody's first position, and then 1.6, 3.7, 6.4, and that's as far as I'm going to go. But you guys are going to go, till you're done. I think there are 20 data points. So starting with 4, that'll put you, I think, down to 25 because that first data point was counted as 0. Now for the times, one of the nice things is that your time increment always increases by the same amount. And so this is where you can use your spreadsheet capability so you don't have to keep typing in numbers over and over again. Your first one, and this will go to the nearest thousandths. So the first one is 0.00. The next one would be 0.025. Next one 0.50. And once you get done here, if you highlight all of these guys and then click and drag, I only need to go one more. Actually, that didn't do what I wanted it to do. So let's undo that. Remember, it is Control Z, or you can use the little undo button here. And what I'll do is do these. How about we do these 2 and try it? And that didn't do it either. So, all right, let's see here. Oh, that's why. Shh, dumb. Okay, I'm going to undo the last one. It's 0.50. There we go. Now that I got that figured out, and I'm not editing this so you guys see all the mistakes, now we can go back to highlighting everything. And there we go. See, It only does exactly what you tell it to do. And when you do that incorrectly, it makes it look like it's making the mistake when I actually made the mistake. All right, so you guys can drag that all the way down so it will fill your time column up. And if your first two columns were done correctly, by the time you get to your last position spot, you should be around 150 centimeters. And by the time you get to the end of your time column, I think you're at like 0.5 seconds. Okay, now the next column that we're going to have you calculate, you've done before, and this is interval velocity. Now, I'm just going to use the variable for this to save a little space, and the units for this one would be centimeters over seconds. Now, if you recall doing the interval, doing an interval calculation, you always take a value on a particular row and you subtract the value right above it. And then on the bottom, you're doing another subtraction. And the reason I point this out is that we are not able to do that here on row 4. So I'm just going to leave this blank. All right. So the first place that we can do this calculation is in cell C5. Now, in order to tell the spreadsheet we are going to do a calculation, we have to hit the equal sign first. And then to make sure that it does the arithmetic in the proper order, we need to have our numerator and our denominator in parentheses. So if we're doing interval velocity, we need to take the position that is on the row we're at. So that would be cell A5. So we just click on A5 and you can see that enters into our cell. And then we want to subtract from that the cell that was right above it, which in this case is A4. And then we finish our parentheses, put our divide by, and then we need another set of parentheses. And this time we need to do the corresponding difference between the times of those two cells. And once we're done that, we finish with our last parenthesis, and then we can hit equal, and we get that value in that cell. Now, this is where we get to use that spreadsheet capability of the drag and fill. So all you need to do is come down and get those crosshairs, and then drag all the way down to the bottom and let go, and it will do the subsequent calculations for you. So that will take care of column C. Now for column D, we are going to do an additional calculation. Since we know our object was picking up speed as it fell, there is also, we can also calculate the interval acceleration. Now, I learned from last night doing this that I do not see any place that we can do a superscript or a subscript for our units. So if anybody knows how to access that, I know I can do it in Excel, but not here. So we're just going to express the units of our acceleration. I'm going to call it the old-fashioned way, which is centimeters per second per second. Now, again, you'll notice once you enter this, it's a little bit wider than the default width of the column. So if you come up between D and E and get those little double arrows and double click, the column width will adjust so that it will never get cut off. Now we're going to do this interval calculation again, and it's the same basic concept as the interval velocity, but the difference is instead of taking the difference between two positions like we did in the interval column, we are going to take the difference between two velocities, which you have just calculated in column C. So that means in D4, where I'm at right now, I cannot do one of those calculations because I don't even have an interval velocity. And in D5, I cannot do a calculation either because I don't have a velocity before the 64. So the first place that I can do one of these calculations is going to be in D6. So we are going to set up our interval calculation again by starting with an equal sign and then a parenthesis. And this time we are going to take the interval velocity on row 6 and then subtract from it the interval velocity we got from C5 right above it. And then we are going to close those parentheses and introduce the division bar. And then another set of parentheses. Excuse me, you got to go back and get parentheses. And take the time from row 6 minus the time from row 5. Close the parentheses and then hit enter. And then we will come back to this cell and we will click and drag and you will go all the way down to the end. Now, I only have 2 cells here in my acceleration column, but you're going to go all the way down so that you'll have a total of, I think it's 18 or 19 numbers. Now, before we get to the graphing, there is one additional thing that I would like you to do on your data table here before we transition to the graphing. And this is something we did not do on the Toy Car Lab. At the bottom of the interval acceleration column, you can see that the numbers, they bounce around a little bit, but they should be fairly consistent. We are trying to look at the acceleration of this object overall, and these numbers in column D just give us the acceleration value from point to point. So in order to say what would the overall value for our object be, one of the things that we can do here is to take the average of all those numbers. Now, if you ask somebody in a math class how to do this, I'm sure they would do it properly. They'd say add up all the pieces and then divide by the total number of pieces. Well, if you come into your toolbar here on your spreadsheet, and I'm using my circles here, you can see this little symbol, the sigma symbol here. This is where you can access different functions that are like pre-programmed into the spreadsheet. So what you're going to do is you are going to come to the cell that is below the last cell in column D here where you're doing interval calculation, and you are going to click on that cell so it's active and then come over to your functions menu and you will see the second one down here says average. So when you click on this, it will enter your average function into that cell. Now, if you remember that the function is equal sign and then the word average in parentheses, you could go ahead and type that in if you want to type it in. But there are a variety of functions available to you that are pre-programmed if you know how to access them. Now, once you have that entered there, you'll notice that it already has the cursor inside the parentheses. All you need to do is come back up into column D and highlight all of the cells with the values. And you'll see now that I only have 2. So you can see the pattern that they enter it in is the beginning cell and then a colon and then the last cell going down the column. And once you've done that, you could just hit enter, and what it will do is it will give you the average value for all of that, which is super convenient. Okay, so at this point, I am going to say that your data table is done. Now, as a quick review, in your interval velocity column, if everything went smoothly there, I think by the time you get down to the bottom, you're at least around 450 to 550 centimeters per second. If things went well in the interval acceleration column, the numbers aren't exactly the same, but there is a consistency to them as you look at them from top to bottom. Okay, at this point, we are going to do a graph. Now, technically, I'm going to have you do 2 graphs, but one of the new things I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you put 2 graphs on the same set of axes. So what we need to do now is we need to come over and hit insert a chart. And we should get a chart that pops up there. There we go. Now, they have pre-programmed a few things for us here, and I don't know if that will happen for you or not. Now, one thing that I'm going to want to do, eventually I'd want to make this a little bit bigger, but I do want this to fit. So as I'm doing stuff, you can see all four of the columns. So I'm going to resize it a little bit here. Now, I don't want some of this stuff on here, but I will say when we go to the data range, this is where you're going to select all of the cells that you might use as data. And you'll notice that it has the little grid symbol over here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the stuff that it kind of pre-filled for me. And when I click on this, I'm going to get this little pop-up window about selecting. You are going to want to go from A4 and then drag and fill down to, don't worry about column D, but column C all the way down to the bottom. Okay. And once you do that, you can click OK, because that is going to be the total. That's going to be the total amount of data that we're going to take a look at. Now, the two graphs that I want you to make, I'm actually going to type this in here, and then you guys can get rid of it later. Graph one, I'll go ahead and put graph one is going to be X versus T. And then the second one we want to do, graph two, is going to be V versus T. Now, the one thing that is going to be convenient here is we are going to have this. Remember, the first thing that we list in our graph title is the vertical axis, and the second thing we list is the horizontal axis. So one of the convenient things in this graphing is that both of our graphs are going to use the same horizontal axis. So if we come back to our graph and we double click here, we get our chart editor. We do want a scatter chart, so that's good. And we have our data range highlighted. And on the x-axis, this is where we want to put T. Now, if you look, when you click on that, it gives you the little grid here. So we are going to click on that, and we get our little pop-up again about selecting a data range. This is for the horizontal axis, which is the T. So you are going to come over, and starting in B4, you are going to highlight the data from B4 and then click OK. And then you'll notice now it has changed the scale along the bottom to an appropriate one because it's using the time data on the bottom. Now you will notice here that it has created 3 series for me, one for each column. I am not going to use the B column on, and so what I need to do here is I need to, let's see, if we click on series, we're going to, just to be clear here, I am going to remove all of these pre-populated ones that they have put in here. And so it says I don't have any data, but what I'm now going to do is I'm going to add, not x-axis, the series. I am going to add a series here. And when I do that, I get my little pop-up box again. I am going to, one of the series that I want to add is my A column. So I can click that. And then I want to add another series. And that one is going to be the C. Now, I'm only going to start the C column from where I have data. And then I'm going to click OK here. And now I have my two values here. Now, if you look at what I have here, I'm missing some data here. I don't have a particular plot at a certain point, but we'll fix that in a bit. I'm trying to put two graphs on, 2 lines on the same graph. So to do this, what we need to do is we need to go to the Customize submenu here. And when we go to this, the key place we want to hit is series. And when we hit the series, you will notice where they have this apply to all series. We actually have two different graphs on here. And so what we are going to do is let's see, which one do we want to do here? Our blue ones are our X and the red ones are our V's. So what we want to do is we want to come down and highlight the red one. I'm going to try this and then move that underneath. You'll see where it says axis. That tells you where you want to put that particular axis. We want to put that on the right axis. So now when you look at your graph, what you should notice is that you have the scale or the scale for your vertical axis for the positions on the left, and you have the scale for the velocities on the right. Now, once you have done this, let's see, what you need to do, what I want you to add, and you're going to have way more data points than I have on mine. I want you to change your axes. Make sure that your axes all start from 0, whether it's vertical or horizontal, and your horizontal axis should go from 0 up to, I believe it's 0.5. Your position axis should go vertically from 0 up to about 150, and your velocity axis, which would be on the right of the scale for it, should go from 0 up to about, like I said, 550 or give or take. And you should have all of your data points plotted. Now, the last thing that I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you add a trend line and an equation for each of these lines. Now, to do that, you stay on the series submenu here, and below where they have all this information about the formatting, we have the trend line. So right now I am highlighted only for the red, which is my velocity line. So I can hit trend line here. And when you look at your trend line for your velocity, you should see a fairly straight line. So once you hit the trend line, you are going to stay on the linear type. And then the last thing that I want you to do is hit the use equation, so it will display the equation for you up at the top of the graph. After you are done doing that, you can come back up here to the series, up by the series menu, and change over to the other line, which is your position versus time data. And here, you're going to leave it on the left axis, but you are also going to add a trend line there. But you should notice that your X versus T data points do not plot in a straight line, and they plot in a curved nature. Now, that means we need to change the type of relationship here, and I'll highlight this here. And out of all these possible relationships, the one that you want to click is the polynomial. And if you did not know exactly what degree polynomial you were talking about, you might have to decide, is it a second, third, fourth, or so forth degree polynomial? I will go ahead and tell you, you can just stay with the 2. And then I want you to come down and use equation again. So when you're done, you will have 2 equations up here on the top of your graph. One will be the equation for the linear velocity relationship, and the other one will be an equation for the curved position versus time. When you're done with that, I'm going to say that's as far as I need you to go. Now, you'll notice in my case, I really, if you want to put your title and such in there, you are welcome to. I am not really looking for that. If you want to label your axes, that's fine. I'm not really looking for that because I'm going to assume that we all know what we're looking at here. And so for me, just to make sure, no, not horizontal. I want the horizontal axis. I can officially say I want to go from 0 to 7.5, and that kind of fixes it so it looks better. Your guys' graph will be much larger in nature because your not necessarily size-wise, but your numbers will be much larger on the axes. So once you're done with that, you don't need to turn that in yet because we'll be talking about it in class. And I'm sorry I went over my 20-minute limit. I'm up at 25. So I am going to stop sharing and cut this off and post it. And hopefully that was helpful for you guys. This thing over here on the graphs, I'm going to get rid of that now because I don't want that to be part of your final presentation. So basically, when you guys are done, you should have something that looks like this with a much longer data table and a much more complete graph with those 2 lines and equations up at the top. So I hope this has been helpful, and good luck to you. And I am going to stop sharing now and sign off. So I will see you guys later.